You were a part of... Did you ask Virgil the question, or was it...
No, I think it was James who asked the question on the contracts. But
glowing in his praise of Ibrahima Konate and his performance last night, and understandably so, because tough assignment with Brian Bobby, I think it's fair to say, but he stood up to it and more, admirably. But then he obviously touched on the contract situation and his future. So, yeah, I've got it here in front of me, but feel free to sort of ad-lib and just generally talk about sort of Virgil's stance on where he was at.
Yeah, I mean, the good friends off the pitch, aren't they? I think Virgil has always been keen to foster a friendship with whoever the centre-back partners are. You know, we were big mates with Joel Matip. You know, Joe Gomez calls him his big brother, and it's the same with Ibrahima Konate, isn't it? So, you know, Van Dijk has always said Konate was sort of better than me than I was at his age, and the challenge has always been to fulfill that potential. And you know, you could argue that he has at times, other times he's not been at his best, and this season has sort of been that way, hasn't it? I think Slot said after the game he was impressed, but he wasn't surprised with the performance, and I thought he was excellent, really. A couple of really important pieces of defending in each half to deny Bobby. And yeah, Van Dijk said he's world class, Konate. You know, he's gets on with them really well, and they've spoken about it, and he'd love to see him stay, but ultimately it's in the club's hands, it's in the agent's hands, and you know, we're waiting to see what the next development is. And I'm trying to think, actually, you know, these talks have been going on for at least 18 months now.
Did he first bring it to our attention when he referenced it? Was it pre-Lille last season?
So
he spoke openly about it, didn't he, at one point?
Yeah, there was reports around about maybe October, November time that talks had opened over a new contract. And then he got asked about it in the Lille press conference, which I think was January. Okay. And he said he had been offered something, but obviously hasn't been signed, so it wasn't to his liking. And then we spoke to him the day when Liverpool lifted the Premier League title, which was his 25th birthday or 26th birthday, 25th of May, wasn't it? So he was. I think we caught him at a good time, actually, in a good mood, clearly. And he told us that everything that we'd seen on social media was completely fake, I think he branded at the time. So talks have been going on for a while, but the fact that nothing seems like it's imminent is probably quite telling. What was fascinating was that report, I think it was from David Ornstein earlier this year, or maybe it was even last year now, before Christmas, where Real Madrid had contacted Liverpool to suggest that they were out of the running. And that was always the concern, wasn't it, for supporters, that he's just going to do a Trent, if you like, and go to Real Madrid for nothing. And I think at the moment it is looking like he's going to leave as a free agent as things stand, but hopefully that can be resolved. And performances like yesterday just show you what a top-class defender he is when he is on song.
Yeah, most. I think last night, again, he was. Virgil says he was absolutely outstanding. And he was up close and personal with it as well. And he probably came across Brian Bobby a couple of times himself and realised just how daunting a prospect that was, because he is, you know, a real physical specimen who can be difficult to deal with on the best of nights. And it is interesting, Virgil here references his own contract situation, and he suggests it wasn't his decision to leave it that late, but it is what it is. He then goes on to say there is hope for Konate staying. I think last night, Newcastle a fortnight ago, and actually how Konate has handled, obviously, tragic personal circumstances. He obviously spoke post-Newcastle and said it was his decision to come back a bit premature. You know, the club and Slot were keen to give him as long as possible, but he wanted to come back, and I think, I'm paraphrasing, but help the lads. That just shows you that whilst all this is rumbling on in the background, he once again, like some of the others we spoke about earlier, remains a consummate professional and continues to fight for Liverpool cause, which to me suggests that, you know, maybe if the deal was right and maybe if Liverpool did meet his demands, I hate that expression, but still, there's definitely a contract and a deal to be struck here.
Yeah. And he did something similar last season as well. I think Gomez got injured at West Ham and Konate was still injured, but he sort of played through the pain barrier to come back a little bit earlier and help out the team at the time. So he's clearly committed to thinking about the team first and foremost. And I think what might go a long way, or what I hope might sort of factor into some of the thinking, is how much Liverpool have helped Konate in recent weeks. You know, they gave him as much compassionate leave as he wanted. You know, he was in Paris with his family, dealing with the sad death of his father. There was no pressure on him to return. And the reception he got from the supporters when he came back in, and he scores that goal against Newcastle, the teammates obviously mob him because they, you know, what a moment that was for him, and the fans were right behind them as well. So, I hope that is taken into consideration as well when you think, that might not necessarily be the case, at other clubs. Mm-hmm. So that is an important factor for me. But yeah, he's becoming a little bit of a leader, isn't he, in the team? He's captained France over the last year or so, and he's growing in stature and importance in the team. And yeah, for me, you're not going to sign a better centre-back, I don't think.
Not on the cheap anyway.
No, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have to debate about some of the poor form that he's shown this season, but I think to a man, I think every player could probably highlight the fact that they haven't been at their best this season. But when he's on it, like I say, like last night and a couple of other games, thought Newcastle he was excellent as well. He's a top-class defender, which, they don't come cheap. So it's probably better the devil, for Liverpool to keep time down for what, if he is open to the prospect of, another couple of years.
No, I'm 100% in that camp. And I haven't really veered off that. And whilst I, like many Liverpool fans, have been a little bit disappointed, frustrated with some of his performances and some of his moments in performance, because I know Arne Slot was keen to reference the fact that for 89 minutes of some games, he's been near perfect. And then there's one momentary blip and, everything's on fire. All of a sudden, the walls come crashing down. He's been at the scene of too many crimes, I think it's fair to say. To just sort of
Slot said that himself, didn't he?
Yeah. And that's just, that was true, wasn't it? You can't hide from that fact, but ultimately, again, I think he's a top class centre-back. Virgil van Dijk says it, world class. I think their understanding, their relationship, their partnership, there's something to be said for that. His word should, if it doesn't, most definitely carry weight. So if he's coming out quite publicly and saying he wants him to stay, Liverpool should take heed of that, as well as you referenced there. The leadership thing caught my eye, and the fact that he references the fact that everyone sees it on the pitch, but it's actually behind the scenes that he's becoming more prominent as well. So yeah, it all points to me to suggest that Liverpool, Michael Edwards, Richard Hughes, et al., should once again, if they aren't already, be sitting down and trying to thrash out a deal here. Because again, there's clearly a deal to be done. There's clearly a desire from the player's side, from his teammate's side, for Ibrahima Konate to stick around. And also, if you do take it one step further, if you are Richard Hughes, etc., the market. You've seen a little bit of market now. We've had to spend 60 million to bring in Jeremy Jacquet, who we couldn't even get in through the door from the get-go, which is fine, different conversation. But I don't think there's a pool of gettable centre-backs out there that are in our sort of price range a better Ibrahima Konate. I really struggle to find one or two. So you just said it there, just keep Ibu around.
Yeah, it seems like the obvious decision, isn't it? I think maybe where the sticking point lies is he's still on that same contract he signed when he joined in 2021, when he was a very young defender and a little bit of an unknown quantity, not necessarily to the club, but certainly to maybe Liverpool supporters who hadn't seen much of him at Leipzig. So he's still on that contract, which was a contract where he had to prove himself as an elite defender.
That's unlike Liverpool as well, though, isn't it? Something's slipped through the net there. Yeah. And I know there was all that chaos in the sporting director position. Obviously, it was vacant for a bit. Jörg Schmadtke came in. It was all a little bit messy for a bit there. But with 5 years down the line and he's still on his first contract, that doesn't feel Liverpool-like to me. No, definitely. And if you think of how much he's grown since then in terms of his stature, his importance in the squad, his standing in world football, really. He's Premier League winner, FA Cup winner, he's played in the Champions League final. He has grown immensely, hasn't he, in reputation, and he's still on those same terms he signed 5 years ago when he was 21. So that could be where the sticking point is. It might just be too much of a jump from current base wage to what you're expecting to be as a leader of the new look Liverpool, if you like. So that could be what the issue is. And he hasn't been at his best this season, but you've seen, last season, he is capable of partnering Virgil van Dijk, and they are good enough to be the backbone of a team that wins the Premier League. So, yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you tie him down and you maybe look to add another one in the summer, to go alongside Jacquet and, what you've already got there. I still think this might be the last year for Joe Gomez at Liverpool, so maybe looking at someone a bit more experienced, a bit more senior to provide depth and a bit more competition. But, who are you going to get better than Ibrahima Konate for under... I mean, Liverpool just paid 60 million for the 20-year-old who's had 40 senior appearances or whatever it is. So,
You know, they don't come cheap, do they?
No, as you say there, Xhaka is clearly a supreme talent, but very unproven, and he's already cost you £60 million or euros. So yeah, you're right. That market going rate is sky high already. Yeah, save yourself a little bit of work, and there's already talk of, you know, not a rebuild, that's too, but a bit more of an influx of players coming in. So just save yourself a job and keep Ibu around.
Yeah, I think maybe where the issue is, you know, Liverpool have just paid 60 million for Jeremy Xhaka, but that is over the course of a 5-year contract or a 6-year contract, which is manageable in terms of the revenues year to year. But if you're Konate and you're after, you know, for argument's sake, £300,000 a week, you quickly pay out more on that contract than you would paying for the amortization of the transfer fee. So, you know, it's the wages ultimately which clubs pay out for these days, and that is why there is such a correlation between performance and wages in terms of world football and all that sort of stuff. So that could be where the sticking point is with Konate.
Possibly still do it, Liverpool. We'll move on to a different contest situation, actually, and I think it's been sort of doing the rounds a little bit, and it continues to do so. Dominic Szoboszlai reportedly demanding £300,000 a week.
That was a clip from Journo Insight. To check out the whole show, simply download the Redmen Plus app or click the link in the description.